but I loved it. It was a passion, right? And that's one thing I think I notice with kids, with coaching, even my own kids. I think that passion's got to come from within, right? And if they have that passion and that drive and that fire, anything is possible.
That was 20-year pro Frank Banham, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Padola. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Padola, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Padola, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back, or welcome to the At My Hockey podcast with Jason Padola. I am your host, Jason Padola, and today we have on Frank Banham for our holiday special. So I'm recording this intro on the 27th. I actually did the interview with Frank a little bit before Christmas, but if you're listening to this kind of as it is released, happy holidays. I hope that you and your family had a great holiday season and enjoying a little bit of time off and some R&R. I know my family and I are, and it's been this is the most amount of time I've spent at my desk here in the last 4 days, which is something that I can't really say in the last 12 months has happened. So yeah, warmest of wishes to you. But yeah, back to Frank. So Frank is a name that maybe you don't know as a casual hockey fan. He did play 20 years professionally. He was a draft pick of the Washington Capitals, and he did happen to score 83 goals in one WHL season, which is quite remarkable. And he was actually part of a line that is, I believe, historical in WHL history. His line put up 193 goals in the 1995-96 season. His centerman was Mark Deyell. Those two guys had unbelievable chemistry. And Mark loved to pass the puck, and Frank loved to shoot the puck, and so that was a good combination there. And they also had Clark Wilm. Clark Wilm went on to a pretty remarkable, not remarkable, but a very, very solid NHL career. And he was the other winger on that line who kind of didn't get as much credit as maybe he deserved. And we talked about that in the conversation with Frank. But yeah, that line scored 193 goals. Clark had 49. Frankie had 83 and Mark Deyell had 61. And as far as total points are concerned, Mark Deyell had 159 that year and Frankie had 152. Clark had 110. The 159 points is the most that's been put up since that season, so nobody has been able to eclipse that mark in however long that is now. Jeepers, what is that, 25 years? And no one scored more than 83 goals. So really historical type of stats for that season. And yeah, so we talk about that season quite a bit. We talk about Frank moving on and what his what his journey to the NHL looked like. He did get some NHL games. He was actually able to score 9 goals in 21 games in one of his call-ups with the Anaheim Ducks, and we cover that a little bit. That by the way, is about a 34-35 goal pace if he was to play an entire season in the NHL. I mean, those types of numbers would get you, $6-7 million a year now. And for Frank, what it got him was not even really another kick at the cat. He didn't make the team the next year. He wasn't called up. He got called up like 3 or 4 years later by the Phoenix Coyotes for 5 games. And that was kind of it for Frank. So less than 100 games in the NHL. He did play for Anaheim, and he did play for Phoenix. But then he decided to move on and take his game overseas, where he had a ton of success overseas and really found a home over there and found his his love for it again. It's a grind. It is a grind being an AHL prospect. We've covered that before. The bus rides and the wanting to get up to the NHL. Maybe you do get your cup of coffee, and trying to fight your way through and trying to become an NHL regular is no small task and no small feat when people do it. And for Frank, with his injuries and stuff, it was just started to weigh on him, and he decided to go to Helsinki, and he went over to Helsinki and he played a year in Russia, and he was over in the Swiss League, and he was in Austria, and then he ended up actually in Hungary at the end of it all.
and had a great time in Hungary. He actually had so much fun that they asked him to if he would get his citizenship there so he could play internationally with the Hungarian team, which he did. He helped Hungary get out of Pool B into Pool A, and as a 40-year-old, we talk about Frank playing against the likes of Connor McDavid and Brad Marchand for Team Canada at the World Championships, and what a crazy experience that was for him. So it's an awesome conversation. I really did enjoy the conversation with Frank, and we do get really serious for a little while when we talk about Wade Belak, which a 500-game NHLer in himself, was a big, tough, strong enforcer from the blue line, a first-rounder to Quebec, and was Frank's roommate in Saskatoon playing with the Blades. And we lost Wade, 10, 15 years ago now, and yeah, we spent some time talking about that and mental health and and what it feels to lose somebody like that. And so we do get serious for a little while as well, and give Wade the respect that he deserves, and allowed Frank some time to reflect on his good buddy. But other than that, we talk hockey, and we talk development, and we talk upbringing and passion and all the things you'd expect from an Up My Hockey interview. So once again, happy holidays, and I give you my conversation with Frank Deyell. Joining us from Cincinnati, what state is that? Ohio? Cincinnati, Ohio. Frankie Banham, thanks for coming on the show, Frank.
Thanks for having me, Poets. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, no problem. This has been a long time in the making. We've kind of had a little mini discussions here and there over the years, and we're finally doing it. So thanks for getting on.
Yeah, it's always great to catch up with past. I guess we never played together, but just that's the one thing from when you retire you kind of miss, is just that the connection you have with other players, right?
No doubt, man. And the length of time that you played, 20 years, you must have a lot of old teammates in the database, right? Like, it's crazy.
All over the world.
Yeah, I forget who I talked to just the other day, and I mentioned that I was chatting with you. Oh, it's gonna come to me. But anyways, they were like, "Oh yeah," they played with you somewhere overseas. God, I want to remember who that was. But anyways, it happens all the time, right? It doesn't take the 7 connections or the 7 steps. You don't have to go that far usually in hockey to find a guy who played with you or with somebody else.
Yeah, the hockey world's definitely a small world, that's for sure. And it's
yeah. And before we got on here, we just said that you're in Cincinnati, and then ironically, that was my very, very first ever pro experience with the Cyclones. So the Cyclones at the time, well, that was the IHL for the listeners that don't remember or don't know. There was the 2 leagues, the International Hockey League, which was generally an older, more established league, right? It was guys that had played pro for quite a while, or guys that had already been in the NHL and kind of were winding their careers down. And then there's the AHL, which was more of the developmental league that was, still providing prospects up to the NHL. But there was some affiliations back then that were like with NHL programs. So the Florida Panthers, for instance, their minor league team was the Cincinnati Cyclones. So I was drafted by Florida, and then that first year after playoffs, they called me up for their playoffs. So I was 18, I think. I think it would have been 18. Oh, maybe 19, because my birthday's in February. So it would have been 19. I was 19 at the time, and I called up to Cincinnati with a really old team, right? Like 30-year-olds, and like Dallas Eakins was on that team. There's a bunch of guys there.
Donnie Biggs.
Yeah, exactly. Paul Lawless, Biggs, like you said, there was a lot of guys on that team that were very established. And then there was me running around Cincinnati, not knowing what the hell was going on. But so we have a connection there. Do they have a team there still? I don't even know.
Yeah, they do, actually. There's still the Cincinnati Cyclones. They play in the ECHL. So they're affiliated with Rochester. So
okay.
So umbrellaed under the Buffaloes organization. Yeah.
All right, because there's a lot more players, actually. I don't know how many there in Cincinnati, but there seems to be a lot more players in the East Coast League that are on NHL deals now.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah, I think that's why they are all affiliated now with an ECHL team. So right. They know they have a spot to send their their prospects. And Jason Payne's an old teammate of mine from the Mighty Ducks here. He's the coach there now. So they run everything kind of under Buffalo. So Buffalo comes in and they use their goalie coach. And
is he
so it's all
I read stuff on him. He's the first black coach in pro hockey history, right? Isn't that what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So what was he like as a player? What was he like to play with?
Oh, he was a tough bugger. Yeah, yeah. We brought him up. I think at that point he was playing in Dayton in the ECHL back when they had a team, and yeah, we didn't know much on him when he came to our team, but heard he was pretty tough, and
And he was.
I don't know if we fought the first game or not, but we're like, huh, we're kind of like, because he's not a very big guy, he's solid, but we're like, how tough is this guy? And man, he dropped his gloves. I think first fight was against Gary Burnett, who was playing in Lexington, and man, yeah, we're like, okay, he's the real deal. Yeah, he was a tough cookie, that one, but
That's
just
interesting.
good,
Did you ever
good
see
guy.
coaching in his horizon, or did you play with him long enough to really know?
Sorry.
Did you ever see coaching in his future? Like, did you ever
No, I
play with him
didn't
long enough
actually.
to?
No, I
Yeah,
knew after he was done playing, he was doing skills, lessons and stuff in the Toronto area, and yeah, and I think he was coaching midgets or some level there. But he's done a great job in Cincinnati. Um, he's a great person. Um, I would view him as like a player's coach, which is kind of that's more today's game and model. Um,
yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah, he's done well. I'm happy for him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Where do you get out there and watch any of those games? What is do you know what that league looks like now?
Yeah, it's I get down to watch some of the games. It's come a long way from back when we played. I think, back in our era that was basically the end of the line or end of the road really if you ended up there. Right? It wasn't the highest level, but I think now you just see even what I noticed playing in Europe was over those years, I was there in spurts from 2000 to 2016, and you could just see over the years how the levels had closed on the leagues. For example, UK compared to Switzerland or those leagues, and you see it now in the Champions League where that gap is closed within all the leagues, and that
Right.
that carries worldwide. And so now you watch this ECHL. I mean, these players they're not far off from trying to make it the big stage. It's obviously a long road for them because basically you're going to leapfrog all your players that are in the AHL that are obviously all under contract as well. But you see it often with goalies. For example, I remember watching the Cyclones were playing in the finals against Reading, and that's when Quick was playing in the ECHL. So you see goalies a lot
Right.
will make that. They only got to leapfrog two players where a forward, right? You got to leapfrog maybe 12 or 13 that are in the AHL. So
Yeah, I know it's a
a
big
little
difference.
longer
That was
road.
actually that was the story with Spencer Martin this year. I mean, he was number 5 on the Vancouver Canucks depth chart there for a while, and he hadn't played an NHL game in whatever 6, 7 years, and it just takes a few guys to go down, right, or somebody to underperform, and now all of a sudden
Yeah,
he's like a starter in Vancouver for the last 3 weeks or whatever. It's been pretty cool to watch him. And then you must have, well, I know you know the name, and you probably played with him somewhere or against him for sure. But Glenn Metroplet, I had on a little while ago, and
yeah,
he
yeah,
was one of the first. Well, I shouldn't say one of the first, but it was rare back then. I mean, he was one of those guys that played in the East Coast League and then made it to the A, and then made it to the show, and then stayed in the show, right, for a while. Like, what a super cool story that was. You can't help but love those guys that make it right from
yeah,
the
yeah.
East Coast. Like, such a fantastic story.
Well, Metro, I know him well. We're good friends. We still, keep in touch to this day. And just his work ethic, I remember playing against him. Man, for his size, he was a strong bugger. And he worked. He worked his tail off every day. He's in the gym after practice shooting pucks. That's the one thing. If you have that determination, and you stick to it, eventually, you want it bad enough, you're going to get there. And that's a lot of respect to Metro and kind of where he came from and where he got to. And was an unbelievable player too.
Yeah, really
Really
good
good
player.
player. Yeah.
Yeah, his the one story that I've actually used with some of my players now that I'm working with, just from the mindset side, because adversity is going to happen, right? Regardless whether you're Frank Banham or Jason Podolak or Glenn
Yeah.
Metroplet, like, or Connor McDavid, right? Like, something's
Yeah.
going to happen, right? And it's like how you're going to digest that and what story you're going to tell yourself. And the one that stuck out to me with Metro was I think he just scored 120 points or something in the BCHL, and he made his pro sort of debut, and he was in almost made the AHL team. I think he was in the East Coast, and the East Coast team had a lot of older guys. He said it was a good team, and it was such a good team that he not only did he not play, but he was sleeping on the stairs of the bus. Like that's where his spot was, by the bus driver.
Oh yeah.
And he said he was a healthy scratch for the first 20 games, I believe, sleeping on the stairs of the bus on the road trips. And like in this day and age, like how many guys would have done that, right? Like he would still
Oh
be there and not
yeah.
have gone home, right? And in 2 years, like Frankie, I think it was 2 years from that point, he ended up getting in the lineup, ended up turning into a point a game guy that year. And I think it was 2 or 3 years later, he was in the NHL, like from sleeping on the stairs of the bus, right? Like I
Yeah.
just love that. Like that's like the
No,
stuff
no.
that movies are made out of.
Yeah, I mean that adversity part is an important part. That's why I believe I coach in the area as well, and it's you got to let the younger kids face and experience it a little bit, because eventually they want to continue climbing the ladder and getting to the top levels. You're going to face that at some point, so you need to have an understanding how to deal with it, how to work through it, and you get to 17, 18, 19 years old or 20, and all of a sudden you're facing that for the first time. It's it could be harder on some people to work through that.
Yeah. Well, how do you? So if you're a coach there, what levels are you working with?
I work with all the levels really in this area, kind of, with all practices and trainings,
Right.
and then coaching wise, I'm usually just with the '09 group, so it'd be like the 13U.
Oh, okay,
Um,
cool. Yeah, that's the age of my oldest son is an '09.
uh,
Um, but you mentioned like you want them to experience adversity, or maybe it sounds like you would even like architect it or engineer it in sometimes. Like, what do you think is appropriate level of adversity, or what are you speaking about with kids at younger ages that you'd want them to try and experience something so they can get through it?
yeah, the one thing with USA Hockey, I don't know if they do the same in Canada, but it's they run the shifts at like 2 minutes when you're playing half ice. Do they do the same in? Yeah. So to me, it's a bad habit they get into. So it's hard when you get them out of that age into, I guess that would be, you're going from mites to squirts, and just getting them to buy in and staying on, playing fast as a team. That all of you got to stay at 45 seconds to a minute, right? That's how you play fast as a team. And but some of them are used to like, well, I'm just going to stay out here till 2 minutes. And of course, yeah, you stay out there, you keep waiting. Something's going to probably maybe happen eventually, right? Because the game goes so fast back and forth. Um, but just trying to teach them that part, like, hey, it's everybody is a team, and um, it's when you're taking 45-second-minute shifts, you're more of a sprint than rather 2 minutes waiting for something to happen. Now you're going out there to make something happen.
Right.
Um, and then cutting their ice time on maybe how they're playing that game, but explaining okay, this is why you're not playing as much, and
What
you
would
know
be a reason for you at that age? Like I'm from your. I think we're cut from the same cloth when it comes to that. I don't enjoy sitting kids, but what and I don't do it very often either. But what would be a reason for you to sit some on the bench? What would you have to see?
well, I mean, I don't do that often, but if I did, it'd be actions within maybe something undisciplined or losing their emotions. It's one thing I really try to preach to the kids is it's hockey's such a game of emotions, and you got to learn to control those emotions. You know, there's a lot of times I'm yelling at my assistant coaches like, "Hey, we don't say anything to the refs here." They'll get yelling, and I'll be like, "No, no, no. If anybody's going to talk to the ref, I'll talk to the ref, and I'll have my captain go over and have a conversation with them, right? Because I said we start yelling at the refs, well, then that's an excuse for the kids, and guess what? They start yelling, right? So just that, and that really can be excuse, and it's I'm a believer refs make mistakes just like players and coaches do, right? They're not perfect. There's 12 guys on the ice at once, and if there's just two of them at this level, they're not going to see everything, right? They're going to make mistakes. So
Yeah.
I try to
Yeah.
eliminate.
No. Yeah, and we're so influential, and I shouldn't even say at the younger ages, right? I mean, there's I just had on Scott Borak, head coach of Merrimack, right? D1, number 5 team in the nation, and
Yeah.
he just told a story, really awesome story about a guy that was sitting on his bench that had a letter on. I mean, not a player that could get a regular shift, but had won a letter just from the way that they developed the program there, and he came into his room between the second and third period, and the coach thought that maybe he was going to be complaining about ice time in this big game or whatever, and
Yeah.
he just said, he said, "Hey, coach, I mean your energy's pretty negative right now. You know, I think you got to tone it down. It's rubbing off on the guys. You know, like
Wow.
yelling at the ref and doing whatever." And
Yeah.
so I mean, it's totally influential everywhere, right? So I mean, good on you to recognize it, because boys, the players just soak that thing up, and then they feel entitled to start yelling. And if there's anything wrong with our sport, I think is it how entitled people feel that they can yell at the ref,
Yeah.
whether it be parents, players, or coaches, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, I was just sitting at a game the other day. I forget where it was, and it was a BC junior game, and and the crowd started yelling the "you suck" chant, right? Or "ref, you suck," right? And
Yeah.
and there was like 8, 9 year olds. They were yelling. They thought it was hilarious, and I've never really thought of it before, honestly, because I've heard that lots, right? And I'm like, this is so strange that this is like allowed, and
Yeah.
this is, you know what I mean? That a group of adults and kids are screaming at like a 20-something-year-old person that they suck, right? And it's like
Yeah.
totally normal. Isn't that
Yeah.
strange?
Yeah. No, I remember as a kid, I was probably maybe 12, 13, and back when I played in Calahoo, we played like PWD level, right? That's was like the lowest level back then. And I was one of the obviously stronger players on the team, but you're always getting hacked, tripped, whatever. You learn to deal with it, right? Um, that's part of it. But there was this one game I was just like, the ref wasn't calling anything, and finally, I don't know, I just lost it, and I ended up shooting the puck at the ref. My dad saw it, and that was the next day. He had me signed up for reffing school. He's like, "You're reffing now." So now I'm like 12, 13, and I'm reffing like old timer games, and I'm getting yelled at, right, by these guys, and it's like, yeah, it taught me a pretty good lesson. Like, hey, you better respect the refs.
Good for you. That's a great
Yeah.
move by your dad. But yeah, getting back though to the sitting of the kids, like I mean, because I don't know, I'm working as a mental performance coach in the BCHL and with other teams around North America and with individual players, and a lot of these players nowadays are like super scared to make a mistake. Like I guess I mean I suppose we were back in the day too, because like mistakes are really punished, and it's one of the things that I try not to do, or I think I never do as a coach, is punish like a mistake. I mean, an effort, something
Yeah.
you're trying to do something right. You want that player to go out there and not feel nervous, right? Trying to be a hockey player. There's no fun being nervous trying to do that. But I personally will, like, lack of effort for me is a huge thing, right? Like if I
Mhm.
have to continuously ask you to work hard, then you're just not going to play.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a non-negotiable for me. And the other one would be, like you said, respect. Like lack of discipline would be a thing. And then for me, the third one is like, depends on the age group, but like U13, U15, like if there's a route or if there's an assignment that you're supposed to do and you continuously not do it, like I just can't put the player out there. I mean, they have to be able to adapt and listen to that scenario. So
Yeah.
it's never a skill thing for me, and it's never a mistake thing. It's usually about a being able to listen thing or a compete thing.
Yeah. 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 And I've never set a player for mistake. I tell all my players, hey, this is a game of mistakes. The other team's going to make mistakes as well. I mean, even at the NHL top level, there's mistakes being made. But it's what you do to react after that mistake. So something like that. I don't. I'm not going to sit a kid for that. It's more discipline and controlling the emotions.
Yeah, good for you. I
Like,
love your statement there. It's what you do after the mistake. Like that's totally a narrative for me. Like if
yeah,
if if players start to recognize that it's totally not about the mistake, but the story they're telling themselves is how they respond after it. Like, how do I show up? What type of player am I after this goes wrong? Like it changes the wiring, on the mistake itself. It's like the opportunity comes after the mistake, right? Like the mistake
yeah.
is nothing, but it's like the opportunity now is how do I show up in this game for my teammates, for my coach, for myself. And I love that you said that, because I think that really can be inspiring for them.
And yeah, I mean, as creative the game is nowadays too, right? Like, I really don't stress a lot. What I started with kids was just teach them the game defensively, right? It's hey, you can create great offensive opportunities out of good defense. So really, the only kind of structure part of it is the defensive game. Offensively, you show them different scenarios and things to try in different situations. But I basically let them do what they want, be creative with it. Right, that's the game now days. And even you look back with Gretzky back in the day, how creative he was. Just doing things that we'd never saw before. And now we see, this day and age with some of these things these young kids can do nowadays. And it's, I'm a big believer of that. It's a good part of the game. Makes it exciting. Seeing creative stuff happen on the ice that you and I had never dreamed of trying.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, from a coaching standpoint, that's how I try to approach it too, is more concept based as opposed to systems, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like offensively, you're trying to create 2-on-1s, or you're trying to create space for somebody else, or you're trying to find that empty space, right? Like, how do you do that? What's the concept behind creating those opportunities? And I think as a coach, you can definitely encourage that. I mean, for instance, how active defensemen are now on the blue line, right? Like in our day, they just pretty much stood there, right? They weren't able to go anywhere, and now they're super active in the O zone, right? They can leave the line, they can walk the line, they can come down the middle, you can do the high scissor play, and so just exposing players to like what that looks like and what the options are, and then allow them to be creative within those concepts, I think is super important. Because I think gone are the days, or for the most part, gone are the days of how we were coached, which is generally probably pretty strict systems in almost all areas of the ice.
Yeah, that's a big thing. It's what I tell kids now, and even my assistant coaches. Part of that is not only teaching the team, but having the coaches all on the you know all in the same boat, really, on what you're trying to teach and stress. And I tell kids now, it's there's not 3 forwards, 2D. It's 5 offense, 5 defense. Right. And if my defense can go, I want you to go. I want you, because the game is, around offense a lot. So, and it's harder to create now as well, I think, than, you got to work a lot harder, and you need your defensemen involved to create offense.
I want to take a short break from my conversation with Frank to thank you, as always, but especially right now because we are heading into a new calendar year. 2022 is about to close, and 2023 will represent season 3 of the Up My Hockey podcast. And I just wanted to say thanks for everyone who's listened, everyone who's downloaded, everyone who has subscribed, everyone who has taken the time to let me know what the conversations mean to them, or how they've used them, or how it's helped. And I'm grateful for every one of my listeners. I'm grateful for everyone who chooses to spend time with me and my guest on a weekly basis. And like I've said here in the last month or so, I'm definitely looking to double down on the podcast and to make sure that I have an episode weekly, and to make sure I keep providing fantastic guests with great storylines, and that's what you can expect from me in 2023. More of the same on a consistent basis. And thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to write the reviews as well. I mean, I always say that, and sometimes you guys listen and sometimes you don't, but I know, like, for instance, there's 52 ratings on Apple Podcasts right now. A lot of them you can't review on, but Apple is where most of you are listening from, and most listeners listen from. About 50% of my audience is on an Apple device, and there's 52 ratings to date, which I'm grateful for every single one of them. But it's crazy when I think about what the overall download stats are, and the overall download stats are like over 40,000 at this point. So as far as from a percentage standpoint, it's obviously not a huge chunk. And it really does not take any time at all. If you just go to the podcast on your device on iTunes and you press review, and you can press 5 stars, and you can just give a thumbs up if you want, is really all you have to do. It can be that quick and it can be that easy. So yeah, I mean, if you are one of the people that haven't reviewed yet, or even if you did and it was a couple years ago and you want to put another one on there, I believe you're allowed to do that. So definitely helps. It definitely lets me know that you guys are listening to this and that you guys care and want to get back and want to help spread the word about the podcast and keep moving up the charts. I'm actually back into the top 100 in Canada for podcasts and elsewhere in the world as far as the charts are concerned. At the peak, the podcast was hit number 24 in Canada, which is I'm quite proud of and quite impressive, to be honest, considering that there's zero distribution from media channels and zero money spent on advertising, and it's just me in my office and producing these things. So that was pretty cool, and we're back into the top 100 now with being consistent and with you all helping by downloading and keeping listening to the pod. So we're hopefully going to keep climbing the charts, but it also matters if you guys do leave the reviews and if you help position the podcast so new listeners can find it. And that's what the reviews do, and that's what the downloads do. Is that whatever you're listening to it on, it recognizes that, hey, this is getting a lot more hits or a lot more likes or a lot more reviews. People are listening, and now they're going to show it to other people who are interested in hockey. So thanks again. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. 2023 is going to be fantastic, and I look forward to providing some more great content for you guys. Now back to the episode with Frank Banham. You mentioned Calahoo, so we should actually start there just with your own story. We haven't really even touched on you yet, but Calahoo, Alberta, I've never been. Just read in the bio there, it was a super small town and essentially, one rink. I mean, totally sounds Canadiana, right? Like how a small town like that would do. First of all, how big is Calahoo, and how did you guys have your own rink?
So it was a town about 75 people. Which they don't call it a town, they call it a hamlet. That's the name. But yeah. No, I grew up there. All my buddies lived there. Obviously, we had enough each year for a hockey team and baseball team, and that's what we did. We had a rink there, which we were in a town like that. We received government grants to keep the rink up and running, and basically a small town like that, like we had the keys to the place. So I remember times at 12, at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, we're out there playing, and we would scrounge up, equipment laying around the rink for someone to be goalie. And I remember as a kid, I was playing goalie. We didn't have a goalie helmet, and I'm wearing a back catcher's mask, thinking about it back now, like, geez, we're crazy, right? A big opening through the eyes. And, but we had fun. I mean, it was, we'd be out there for hours and hours. And that's one part I see now with kids these days. It's like every time they're on the ice, they're being told what to do, right? And they don't have that time on just being a kid and being creative, right? It's now, I don't know how it is in your area, but our area, at $400 an hour for ice time, and not, only 3 rinks in this area, right? You want to take advantage of that as much as you can to get the most out of those practices. We don't have the luxury outdoor rinks here where, kids can just go out and be creative. And I remember as a kid, you'd play against all different ages, and you just figured it out. And that's where you kind of honed your skills in and learned to make it work as a smaller guy on the ice.
Yeah, no, great point. And I've touched on that lots of times, and I try my best. I try my best with my own programming is to allow that space, right? And with my kids for sure is because you're just playing, right? Like, and I don't want it every time that there's a coach with a whistle in their mouth telling them what to do. And actually, I just sent out my spring schedule for this spring coming up, and I have some tryouts coming up here over the break, and there's a day dedicated, a 3-on-3 scrimmage day. That's like all I do is just stand there and just make sure nobody gets hurt and and let them play, because they don't do that on their own, right? And there's not really an opportunity to do that, and everyone's so busy and doing stuff. You just don't go to the pond like we used to and just go have a game pickup. So I really do try and incorporate that, because one, that's where the kids get passionate. I think that's where you grow the love of it, and it can't just be all serious all the time. So
Yeah.
How influential do you think? Like, was that like the most influential thing? Like, just having that access to that rink, do you think, and just your buddies and being able to go out there as much as you want?
Yeah. I mean, that was huge. Like, not only that, my dad made me an outdoor rink. So if I wasn't skating down at the rink, I was skating outside. So
Yeah,
it was on the ice every day, right? And just that amount of ice time and working on the game, no matter what you're doing, right?
yeah,
It's going to help evolve the game. And in our town too, we have the coaching was good. It's a passionate town for sports. Craig Berube, who coaches the St. Louis Blues, like half the town is Berubes. It was either Berubes or Quintels. So, but even all his family were, he had a lot of uncles and they were all involved in sports, all coached, and just kind of from that background of just the work ethic and not backing down and all that, learning all that as a kid. And I remember Craig Berube's uncle Emil. He's kind of like he was like the godfather of our town. Really supported everything. He was part. All the brothers, they owned the meat shop there, so he was the one that always donated everything. And actually, I remember when I first went to Fernie and I made the team. I called my dad. I'm like, hey, I'm not gonna stay here. I'm coming home. I was just homesick because I went there not even thinking I was gonna make the team. I just jumped in the car with my buddy who was going to the tryouts, and after that Sunday, that coach said, okay, this you made the team. You're going home with this family. And my buddy didn't. That came. He didn't make it, so he went home. So there I'm. I got a pair of underwear and a socks and a pair of shorts and going to starting school the next day. So I called him after first week. I said, I'm coming home. And then he had Emil call me, which is Craig Berube's cousin. And Emil was just talking to me, had a good conversation. He was like, you should really stick it out if this is what you want to do. And he's like, I'll tell you what, he's like, this month, he said for the season, I'll give you, I think it was back then, $20 a goal and $20 assist. So the first month, right, I get a letter in the mail. It's like $300 cash in there, right? 15, 16 years old. Like, this is great. So a couple first 2 months went by, and then he called me. He's like, I'm going to have to knock that down. We're going to go to $10 a goal assist. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, wait, so that well, what a great supporter, right? I mean, what a great.
Oh, yeah.
So he obviously kept you there.
The whole town was, it was a family, right? It was everyone together. And it's, for a town of 75 people and Craig Berube to make it, and then that I made it. And there's actually another player that's playing in Chicago now from our town, Ian Mitchell, who's with the Blackhawks. Yeah. So it's a pretty good ratio for a town of 75 people.
No kidding, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what about as far as like the length of season? So like when did the ice go in or when did it come out? Because like you said, there was a baseball there too, and I think back when we were growing up, there was definitely not a full-time sport. I mean, hockey, which it seems like it's turning into nowadays. Like when would you be on the ice all that time, and when would you not be on the ice?
I can't remember when we started back then, but I would guess probably September, I'm assuming, and then would go to May, April. Yeah, and it's, but and then we would, once spring came, we started play fastball. But there were times, they'd take the ice out where all of us buddies still go down there and still play ball hockey. Or then once I got older, right, because I saw Craig Berube was shooting pucks during the summer down there all the time, right, just in his running shoes and his gloves and his stick. Well, then, then I started doing that, and then became a ritual. Like, okay, now I'm doing that every day for 2-3 hours a day and just shooting, and I really noticed a difference. At that point I was playing in Saskatoon, and I remember the summer before I'd scored the 83. Like, I was religious. My gym routine. Berube started taking me to Panthers gym, which was down in Edmonton where he was training. A lot of the NHL guys were training there, and with Daryl Duke, and And right after that, I would come and straight to the rink and shoot for 2 hours. And, it was just every day. And my shot that was probably the best my shot had ever been. I mean, I could put the puck wherever I wanted. And that was just from the continuous shooting. And it's funny, I played with Ovi in Moscow. I went over there, and that was the year he got drafted. And I saw him after practice, like he was out there an hour shooting, shooting, shooting. Guys were already at the gym, showered and gone. And he's still on the ice. And then he come off the ice after, and I was kind of like that when I was younger as well. But at that point, I'm 30. I'm like, man, I'll get my 20 minutes shooting in. I'm good. But he'd be out there an hour, and then, then into the gym after that. And it's just, that continuous repetition. But I loved it. It was a passion, right? And that's one thing I think I notice with kids, with coach, and even my own kids. It's I think that passion's got to come from within, right? And if they have that passion and that drive and that fire, anything is possible.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it
super
really
cool.
comes. Yeah.
I love that story. So that was so again, like the influence, though, right? Like of having somebody. Well, one of the things I always talk about is like your personal standards when I'm working with whoever it is that I'm working with, right? Like where do you need to grow, right? Where do you need to elevate that standard or that personal expectation? And a lot of times your environment is so influential in that because there's one slide I have on this one presentation. There's like this dog, like essentially like a lap dog, like an LA lap dog, and then there you have like the Huskies up in Alaska, right? And the LA lap dog might think he had a really hard day because he went for a little trot down by the beach for 20 minutes, and he's exhausted, right? It was 30
Yeah.
degrees out, and holy smokes, that's tough. And then you have the sled dogs up in Alaska, right? That have to catch their own food, and they travel all these miles. And I mean, and so I'm my point is right, your perspective totally matters, right? Like you might think you're working hard, but and until you be around a Berube who's shooting pucks there for 3 hours, I mean, every day, you're like, holy shit. I mean, I guess that's an option, right? Maybe that's
Yeah.
something that I could do, right? And then you grow your own personal standard about what that looks like. So, I think that's amazing that you were able to see that, and then one that you not only you saw it, then you chose to adopt it, and then you also saw the benefits of it. Like, go figure, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was even when I started going for Ruby down to Panthers gym. Daryl Duke was our trainer then, who then eventually became, the Oilers athletic trainer. But I remember my first summer I went with them. They were hard workouts. Boxing was just a part of it, right? We did that. I mean, obviously, I did that not for my game, but like Daryl Duke used to say, like, yeah, I know you're a scorer, not a fighter, but we need to work on this so you can defend yourself, right? So we did boxing every day, but the hard part was the running and the stairs. So we would go downtown Edmonton because the gym was close, where they have real long stairs along the Riverwalk there, and we were running those. I remember the first summer. I mean, they were so hard. I threw up like almost every week, uh, all summer, and then the next year it was like, man, I maybe threw up once, right? But Daryl had always pushed us, and his saying or his motto was, mind over matter. It's like your mind's trying to tell your body it's tired. You get, control your mind, right? So just the summers and summers of training with that and learning that, he was, obviously a big part. And then not only that, we had other guys there, like tons of guys, like, Ray Whitney was down there, Tyson Nash, Zach Boyer, Jerome McGinley was down there at times. I mean, there were just all kinds of guys, all the Oilers guys, right? So when everyone's there together, you're pushing each other as well, right? So I really noticed that year that I scored 83, that year, just that summer. Yeah, I was already doing it, I think 2 or 3 summers with Dookie. And then that summer I really noticed like I made a big
Jump.
step.
Yeah.
I wasn't, always the back of the pack or the middle of the pack. Now I was more the front of the pack. And, I'm like, okay, now, and when you can see that the work you're putting in to start paying off, that's where some of the confidence comes from, right? You can build that confidence by your work ethic and your practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it gets harder, right? I mean, that's the one thing is the younger levels, which I think is probably one of the reasons why I love coaching the younger levels so much, is like the development curve is just like so steep, right? Like you can give them something and they just get better, like right in front of your eyes. You can actually see kids get better, you know. And then
Oh, yeah.
obviously, like the longer you get in the journey, and you're talking now like your fourth year in the WHL, it's harder to make those gains, you know. Like it's
Mm.
harder to see improvement, but when you do, it definitely pays off. I mean, Brad Larson, previous guest, your head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, now he calls it the last 7%, right? Like the guys at his level are trying to get to that last 7%, you know,
Yeah.
and each percent that they get is like a pretty monumental gain, right? But it's so damn hard to get it at that level, and I think you know you're talking about that, right? And that's where that passion and that continuous dedication and commitment to getting better, right? And
Yeah.
you saw that spike there. Let's talk about that 83 goals. I mean, I had Diesel on. So Frankie and Mark Deyell were line mates in Saskatoon. So I'll maybe set this up. I don't know for how many years. I think the last 2 years for sure. I think Mark was there with you, right? Isn't that accurate?
Yeah. Markey was there. DL was there 3 years with me. Wilm, who was our other line mate, was four
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then my old roommate, Belak, he would have been with us 3 years.
Gotcha.
So, you know,
So
and
yeah,
now,
so Mark Deyell and Clark Wilm and Frankie Banham were aligned there, and then that 1 year in particular. I mean, didn't Clarky get 52?
yeah, he was, I think, 49, 50. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'd always played with Clarky on a line all 4 years. Clarky used to, or he was a center. Um, and then Diesel, I played with him, for sure all the last year and the second year, or our second last year, majority of that we played together. Um, yeah, and all those guys that I mentioned, all were a huge part in me scoring 83. DL was he was an incredible passer. He scored 60 himself. Um, but I just knew as soon as he got the puck, he was gonna find me. I was like, I just got to get open and shoot it, right? Um, it was just perfect ingredients for a line with Wilm, who he did a lot of the dirty work, obviously in the corners, rough, and he could score as well, and had good hands, could make plays. Um, and then even having Belak on the backside, right? Although um, skill wise, that wasn't you know his attribute, but the presence he brought with his size, we lived together, so we were almost pretty much like brothers, right? So anyone was taking runs at me, right? It's you got the toughest guy in the league backing you. It bought me a lot of space. It buy me an extra 3 feet of space, which that extra 3 feet that adds up at the end of the year. So even though he wasn't the DL who was setting me up, or Wilm setting me up or doing the work for those 83, he was definitely a part of that as well,
right.
right? That extra 3 feet of space he bought, or the opposition thinking twice of running. Because I remember that season, I can't remember the guy from PA, was their tough guy, took a pretty good run at me, and Belak was right in there. And the rest of the year we played PA. I think the guy was scared to come and hit me. I would be too if I had Belak on my heels chasing me around. He was a
Right.
he was a tough customer, but great person. But yeah, no, it was just we all three of us as a line just got off to a real hot start, and just continued it, and we just kept snowballing and building and building. It was like, I remember 4 games. You're sitting there in the national anthem, and you're mentally going through everything in your head as the anthems being sang. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to score this game. I had that much confidence. I just don't know when. And sometimes we'd score first shift. Yeah, and it was just got off to a great start, and just kept snowballing from there. So it was obviously a fun year with, I had 80 and DL had 60 and Wilma had 50. That's a lot of goals on one line.
Well, it's crazy. It's actually crazy, and I mean, I was in the WHL at that time too, so we saw what you guys were doing though over there in the East, and it was like holy smokes. And I remember talking to Deyell because he was saying like, who was your coach at the time?
Johnny Clark.
Yeah, Don Clark, and he said like one thing that you guys did have, um, which maybe some other guys didn't, was just essentially unlimited ice time. He's like, you'd come to the bench and the coaches would be like, no, you're staying out, or like come off when you want to, or like however he would say it. But he said it was nuts. Like you guys just played a ton, and you guys had great chemistry, and just
Oh
like you
yeah,
said, it just snowballed.
yeah. Well, then the power play too, right? And we had some hell of good defensemen too, like Corey Sarich. I remember Sarich. He was the one that assisted my. I think it was the goal when I broke the record of Herb Pinder was 78. But you had defense like that, Corey Sarich, Pavel Kriz, which was a Czech player, really good, passer and playmaker from the backside. Chad Allen, or I think, yeah, Allie was with us, which Allie was a really good player, and yeah, and then even Paul Butchkowski, which Butch, I think he played a little bit with us, maybe if Willie was hurt, but he was another great player as well.
Yeah, he had 80 points. I mean, that's the funny thing with that line is because like Clark, at least at the time, and we didn't play against you much, but like he was a bit of the afterthought, like as far as like who to worry about, but he was really a glue piece for you guys, and was really like the toughest nails guy. But it's funny when I look at the stats, like he only had, I shouldn't say only, but he had 83 PIMs that year. You had 116 and Deyell had 122, and Clark was tough, right? Like Clark could throw. He was a
Yeah,
tough guy, and ironically, I guess out of the three of you, and I've use that as an example before, is like he had the most NHL experience too, and the most NHL games after that. The way he fit into the league and was kind of a puzzle piece that teams needed. So it was interesting because I think he was a little bit underrated playing with you guys who were so flashy, I mean, and putting up so big a numbers. Yet he was obviously doing a job for you guys on that line.
yeah. With Clarkey, I mean, he was, I would say, more of a complete player than Deyell and I. I mean, you could play him at any position. He played left, he played wing or center. You could rely on him on a defensive face-off or penalty kill or power play. Not only that, he was a tough cookie, great teammate. Always stuck up for his teammates. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see the pro career he ended up having, because he had a lot of different tools where Deyell and I were kind of, I guess you'd say like one-dimensional. We're just all offense. Although we played defense and stuff too. But that year, it's we weren't in our zone a whole lot.
Right. So you got drafted by Washington in '93, and then never really got involved with them. Like, what did they not? Did you not sign with them, or what? How did that happen for you on the contract side of things?
So back then, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I knew after the first year, you didn't have to sign, but I believe they had to make you an offer or something to retain your rights, which they didn't. So I became a free agent, and actually that after I went to Capitals camp that year, I was drafted, and then the next year I went to New Jersey Devils camp, just on a tryout. And that was the year the Devils actually won the cup, and Albany won the Calder Cup. So, at that point, I was would have been 18 or 19, I guess. So, that would have been a tough either squad to crack. Which I lasted a while in the camp and tryout, which was good. Not like the typical one. It's one of the first guys group leaving and heading back to junior, but it was good experience. Yeah, and then the next year I actually went to Chicago Wolves camp after my year junior, which was the IHL then, and they actually made me an offer to stay and play on the team, but it was a two-way deal between the Wolves, which was the IHL, and the ECHL. And I remember actually talking to Deyell through that, saying, "Hey, because I think he was already signed by the Leafs," and I was like, "Yeah, I might." thinking of staying here, taking this. And he said, no, he's like, come back to junior. He's like, I'll promise we'll light it up. We'll get you something better. Right. So if you got basically your center telling you that, it was the one that was feeding you the year before to get you 50. Right. It's like, okay, let's do it. So we came back, and then we got off to that great start, and all three of us were doing great. Wilm, Deyell, I think Willie had signed with the Flames during that time, and then around Christmas, worked out well because of the free agent. And actually, the Caps tried to sign me then. They made me an offer, but I was getting other offers at the time, and decided to sign with the Ducks. So that's kind of how that worked.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know what you would say, but I mean, you're looking for work essentially, right? You're going to AHL camps, and the Capitals who drafted you kind of would probably feel a little bit overlooked, and then all of a sudden, that's after a 50-goal season, by the way, everybody. Like, he's a free agent, 50 goals in 70 games. That's no slouch at all. But it came back, and then all of a sudden now you're the bright shiny penny that all these teams are lining up for, because you're even producing at a higher rate. That must have been a pretty good feel good moment.
Yeah, it was because it's obviously it's your dream to continue on and make it to that next level. And I was basically I was running out of time. It was like now or never, right? Because I'm playing my overage year, and so I didn't know what the plan was for that. So that's it was exciting to now find out, okay, there's teams interested to want you, and that next step is going to happen. So, and that's the thing with hockey, is you never know what everybody's route is different. Sometimes the right place, right time. I even tell kids today, it's Derek Ryan, who played over in Europe when he played for in the Austrian league. He played for the Hungarian team that I'd played for. And he was a good junior player. Then played CIA, played U of A, and then after his career there, came over to us over in Austria, and he had a couple good seasons there. And then I think he was 3 years there. Then he went a year in Sweden, had another good year, and now 30 years old, he signs his first NHL contract, and he's playing in the NHL and has been ever since. So, you never know you know what the path is. Like we'd said earlier, you still have that determination and drive, and that never dies away or never goes away. It's eventually it can work out for you.
Yeah, I actually had Derek on as a guest. I never knew him before. I can't remember. I think I connected with him on Instagram or something. But we had the Chiefs lineage in my favor, I guess, and I reached out and loved hearing his story. Like, amazing story, and yeah, one that we celebrated on the podcast. A good episode to listen to if anyone hasn't yet. I think we should do
Yeah.
Wade. I mean, maybe talk about Wade, because I mean, if you were his roommate and stuff, and I mean, I just knew him from being part of that generation, right? Like, I never knew him personally. I never played with him. Has since passed on, for those listening who don't know. Uh, I don't know, how do we do Wade justice? I heard from everybody that's ever known him that he was like just a gentle giant, like was a super nice, caring guy. And I don't really know much surrounding his death, to be honest. Mental health is such a bigger topic now these days, and people are speaking about it more. Is there anything that we should chat about when it comes to Wade and sort of what happened with him?
Yeah, I mean, it was devastating. Yeah, it's but when I look back, I remember the first time that we were going to become roommates, and his mom, he came from a really good family, really family orientated, and was just a great person, but funny. He's always making jokes, but I remember his mom brought him over to our billets. He was going to move in with me, and although they lived in North Battleford, which wasn't too far from Saskatoon, she's like, well, you make sure you take care of my Wade. And I'm like looking at him like, so I said there, I said, well, I'll take care of him off the ice if he takes care of me on the ice. And well, he ended up doing both, really. But yeah, just a good person, and actually, great human being. When that happened, I talked to him a week prior, and it was just sounded the same, right? Just happy, joking, and never knew for a second that there were any issues going on. And then, and I was actually speaking with him, trying to convince him, like, hey, come play one more year over in Europe with us, get you on come over and play with us. And I think at that time, though, he was doing the Battle of the Blades, and but yeah, no, we as roommates, we were really close. He'd come to my hometown. I would go to his place in North Battleford. Even during the All-Star breaks, he would fly to see me where I was at. So it was really hard. When that happened, just knowing what the person he was, and how happy he was, and to not know that on the inside, because he was always cracking jokes. I'll never forget, he invited me out to his cabin place in Saskatchewan, close to North Battleford on the lake. He's like, so me and some buddies from Calahoo headed out there one weekend, and he's like, oh, I got this new boat. He's like, I want to take you tubing. I'm like, okay. I'd been tubing before, but man, I don't know what kind of boat it was, but he took off in that thing, and I'm like, man, I gotta get up. Like, he was pulling me all over the lake, like in the water. The rooster, I guess what they call it, was hit me in the face. Like, I couldn't even see. I'm holding on for my life, and I'm thinking, man, as soon as he slows down, I'm gonna let go and get off this. But I mean, for 15 minutes straight, I'm white knuckling it. Like, there was no chance. And finally, I flew off, and he comes around and he's laughing. Oh, was that fun? I'm like, I'm never going on that thing again when you're pulling me. I thought I was going to die. Yeah.
Oh man,
But,
good
yeah,
times. Well, I'm glad
he
you're able
was,
to.
he was a good man.
Yeah. Is there any
Yeah.
is there any lesson there at all for anyone listening? Like, I guess you never know, and I don't know. It just it happens, seems to happen too often, and it's usually completely unexpected. I had coffee the other day with Ryan Johnson. My first roommate pro, and Greg, his older brother. No one saw it coming, and obviously left a wake of tragedy, but behind, and what a good leader he was and everything else. And Wade, I heard that too. Like, is there anything like to take away from that as far as from a lesson or anything people could do or know?
Yeah. I think about that now. Like, is there, how our conversation, you know, um, was it, do you take things for granted? Was there a sign there, or something to do whatever you can to help them out, right? So I've thought about that a lot after it happened, and yeah, it's just sometimes you just don't know, but it's as take a lesson from it is maybe not taking things for granted as much, and being more aware of the situation. But when I look back at it, it's I didn't really see any signs there, to be honest,
Yeah.
which is kind of the tough pill to swallow for me on my end. Just losing a great friend like that. That as I said, like, I had a lot of respect for him. That the year I scored 83 and even 50, it was you know maybe only assisted on a few of those, but it's in my mind he assisted on all of them. Just because I think people knew how close we were, and it was like I was like his little brother, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when you have that, um, that team camaraderie like that, or someone's got your back, it you play with a lot. a little bit more balls and
Yeah.
more confidence. You don't
Yeah.
you eliminate that out of your mind
Yeah.
when you know your buddy's got your back, and that's kind of one thing I try to teach with the kids too here, right? Is just you guys always got to stick together and you know play for one another and have each other's backs, right? Like that's that's an important piece if you want to get to the next levels. Is just that teammate part, right? Which was us growing up playing juniors and stuff. That was when we started learning all that. And I can even look back playing in Calhoun. I was already learning that because it was the same team every year. But that's an important piece.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Taking care of each other. I love that camaraderie aspect of hockey for sure. And maybe just to put some closure on the Wade thing. I mean, I had a friend too, wasn't a professional hockey player, but tried to take his own life. It was like I would consider him one of my best friends. And I had all this questions, that you were asking, right? Like, what could I have done, or did I miss something? And I know the people around that. I mean, those are the questions that you ask. But I think, what. Fortunately, he's still here and he's doing fine. But like the thing that we kind of came to is that it was the person that's feeling it needs to feel comfortable enough, because I'm sure that you would have loved to have had that conversation with Wade. Like you would have been there for him, 100%. And it's up to the person that's kind of going through it to be able to open that door and to trust those around them. And I guess that would be the thing that I would just say, if anyone's having any issues with anything, right? Like there's someone around you that wants to hear about it. And there's someone around you that, you're not burdening
Yeah,
anybody, and I think that's just it, and it's okay to not to be okay, as they're saying now with the mental health side of things. So I think that like us talking about it, I think the more people that do talk about it, at least it allows the conversation, I think, to happen. And I do believe the conversation is healing for a lot of people. So um I guess that would be my add to that. And if anyone's out there
yeah, and
struggling,
that's
yeah,
what
talk.
yeah. When I think about back on Wade too, it's he kind of had that. He had to do it through his career, that tough body armor, right? Where maybe he didn't want to let his guard down, right? And it would, I wish he would have, right? I wish he
Yeah.
would have opened up, because I would have done everything I could to help him make sure, you know,
Yeah.
what happened
Yeah,
didn't
for sure.
happen. Because he was just an incredible person on the inside, and he was like a big teddy bear. I remember living together. We wrestled all the time, and I could usually do pretty good against him. He wasn't a strong wrestler, but in no means would I ever dare to try and drop the gloves with him, because his back muscles, man, was he strong. And when he got throwing, oh yeah, I saw him. He did. He could do some damage. That's for sure. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I remember there was a game in Regina we played. It was an exhibition game, and I got kicked out of the game. I can't remember what. Maybe it was fighting or something. But I'm in the locker room, and about 5 minutes later, he comes walking in, and he's got blood all over him. I'm like, oh my god! I'm like, what? Did you cut yourself? Like, what happened? He's like, no, it was the other guy. I'm like, oh jeez.
Take another quick break from my conversation with Frank, just to remind you of what Up My Hockey is on the other side of this podcast. So Up My Hockey is obviously this podcast with Jason Podolin, but Up My Hockey is also a service to teams or a service to players for mental performance and for the mindset side of the game. I've developed a program called the Peak Potential Hockey Project. It's a 4-week program, 4 different mindset themes that are included in that, and individual players can take that course with me. They can take it by themselves, or they can take it mentored with me privately. So I have my mentored mission. I also have my guided mission, which is a group of athletes taking the program together. And also, like I said, the solo mission, where you just purchase a program and take it by yourself. There is that way to work with me. I also have group coaching calls with a set of athletes that are want to take their game to the next level and have big goals and have big dreams and understand that mindset is a big portion of that, and want to be around like-minded players with the support of a coach like me that's going to keep holding them accountable to what they want, keep giving them new ideas and helping them fight through challenges and helping them celebrate their successes. There's also my private clients that I'm super grateful for and that I've been working with, some of which for now 2 or 3 years. And have helped them climb the ladder and getting their scholarships and getting positions on all-star teams and making it to the BCHL and some guys approaching pro ranks. So it's a lot of fun right now being a part of Up My Hockey. And if you are a player who thinks that they should work on their mindset, or maybe you're somebody who doesn't really know what that means but understands that, wow, this probably is something that I should be looking at, even though I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong or broken with me. And that is really the message of Up My Hockey. It's not about being broken or needing to be fixed. It's about how do you become your best. How do you become your best? Which is why I called it peak potential. How do you get what you want? How do you get where you want to go? And when you start asking those questions, and you start listening to the answers, you're going to find out that, you know what, you need to be really curious about your development. You need to understand that you are better with others around you. You are better with a team, and you are better when you keep turning over those rocks to see what's underneath. And if you have not looked at mindset as a way to grow and as a way to gain a competitive advantage, and you have big goals and you have big dreams, and you're honestly missing out. So yes, if you're a player, by all means, hook me up. Check out when the next Peak Potential project starts. Ask me a question if you want. I'm available online through my website. If you are a hockey coach or a manager, whether it's of a minor hockey team at a AAA level or a AA level, or whether you're part of an academy, or whether you're part of a prep school, or whether you're a manager somewhere of a junior team and you know that your players will benefit, one, you are right, and two, I can potentially help. So 2023 is going to be crazy. Next season is already looking busy, but I would love to support you and your team. And if you want to reach out and see what that might look like, by all means, please do. Most of everything is available at upmyhockey.com for the mindset portion. And obviously, Up My Hockey is also an on-ice skill development program where I have things running. So if you're local to the Okanagan area, you can definitely check out upmyhockey.com to see what I have on as far as spring camps or spring programs or summer programs or skill sessions throughout the year. So thank you again, upmyhockey.com. There's also the Facebook group, Up My Hockey Parent Group. There's also the YouTube channel where you can watch this interview if you want. That's Up My Hockey as well. And I'm also at Jason Padolin on Instagram for anyone who wants to follow me on social. All right, now back to the interview with Frank Banham. Let's talk about you. Like, you're one of those guys that I've talked about, and I never really saw you play as a pro, Frankie. So I can't really talk. I mean, obviously we've covered your ability to score though at the junior level. 19, 20 years old, you scored 133 goals. Usually that translates to the pro level, and it did for you at the AHL, and it also did for you like the 1 year it seems like you got a little bit of a crack with the Ducks. So I mean, 97, 98, you had 21 games played, you scored 9 goals. I did a little bit of math before we came on here. In an 82 game season, which the NHL is, that's a 34 goal season. And yeah, it seems like from that point, like you never really. I mean, you had 3 games in Anaheim the next year and 5 games like 3 years later in Phoenix, but never really had a shot after that. Like, what can you talk to me about that run there where you had the 9 goals in 21 games and what it was like, and then also like when they sent you down and sort of what the message was at that point?
Yeah, I think when I went to Baltimore after my year in Saskatoon, I ended up ripping my pubic, or chipping my pubic bone, actually, where your stomach and groin muscle join. And at that point, right, so you signed your first NHL contract, and as I was saying before, that work that I was putting in the summers and training and shooting, it's like, right, it's paying off. So when I had that injury, in my mind, when I look back on it now, it was, why you say not train harder, train smarter, but I thought, okay, I'm going to do even more, right? So now I'm at the gym 6 hours a day, right? And I'm there all, and I'm like, well, it's a stomach. I got to do more sit-ups, and and I was just training through that summer and running and everything, and never got better. It actually got worse. So, my first 2 years were pretty tough because I didn't, I ended up having surgery, and I didn't start the season, my first year with Anaheim till like Christmas, because I had surgery, and then the next year, I missed training camp again and didn't start, until right before Christmas, and then got called up at the after Christmas, and that's where I finished well with 9 goals in the last 20 games. So, looking back on it, if I would have came straight from junior, healthy after that year, I think I would have had it would have worked out better no matter where I ended up, if it was the minors or made Anaheim. But, when you miss some of that time off, the 2 years, I think it takes a lot away. Because those are important years of developing and learning the pro game. And so that was a struggle. But, I was able to get up there at the end and do well. I was playing with Matt Cullen, which Matty was very similar to Deyell, could just find you. So for me, I was good at that. I was good at getting open and shooting a puck. That's what I love to do. And then, I finished well, and I thought, okay, I'm finally 100% healthy here, going into training camp the third year, which was the first training camp I was going to be able to attend, with the Ducks. And they'd brought a new coach in, Craig Hardsburg, from the year before, which was more of a defensive mind coach. And I did well in the preseason, I thought. But as, Hartsey said, he's like, I got my 2 guys here to score my goals. I need guys to focus around the defensive part of the game. I'll rely on these 2 guys to get us the goals. And, I would say if that was a weakness in my game, would have been in the defensive part, right? Because as I said, in my last year junior, we didn't play a lot in our own zone. And then missing those, 2 years, bits and pieces of the first 2 years of pro, made it tough. And then, I got, even though I got sent down, I was still positive and like, I'm going to do anything I can to get back up and continue to work, and because I'm finally healthy. And got sent down in the first week or whatever. I got knocked out cold, concussion. Woke up in the training room. My tooth was gone. I had stitches in the back of my head, my lip. I got rocked pretty good. And looking back at it now, like I played the next week, right? Which, I probably wasn't ready. So, I was facing some adversity, right? It was tough. And that was kind of my decision when, after Anaheim, when I looked to go over to Finland, because I had some options to stay here, but, it's like, I want to try this, see it. And that's where I found that passion for the game again, because it was, over there, you're going twice a day. Training camps are a month long. It's you better have passion for the game, or it's going to be a long year there, because it's nonstop. It's hard training, but I loved it. I loved the Finnish people. They're very hardworking people. Very unselfish players, and I found the love for the game again then, because those first 4 years with Anaheim was a struggle with the injuries and everything. Made it tough.
Can you talk about the Finnish development model? Because they're a country that completely fascinates me. I think it's like 5 or 6 million people there, and they compete on the world stage, and they continue to produce, player after player after player. It's pretty it's pretty astounding, to be quite frank. And I've heard that they do things there a little bit different, just with their minor hockey development system. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, because it's been a while since you've been over there. But do you remember anything different about like the kids growing up, or even you mentioned what the pro game looked like over there? But can you talk about what that hockey experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's what I see compared to here to all of Europe. Growing up in a town of 75 people, right? I don't even think we had to pay fees, to be honest. I remember raising money to selling chocolates door to door to pay for a tournament to go do our tracksuit. We're over here, right? As I tell kids nowadays, I'm like, listen, if the game was this expensive when I was growing up, I would have never been able to play. So you better be thankful and grateful to your parents and grandparents and everyone that helps out, because it is a big commitment, not only time wise, financially wise. But if we get back to like Europe and stuff, even Hungary, and my buddy's running the Hungarian national program, but they get a lot of funding from the government, right? So it's these kids can get on the ice all the time. It's not costing them an arm and leg. So you're getting more people involved, and they're getting more ice time than probably the kids are over here. And not only that, it's over there, the way they run it is the coaches all stay within that age group they're coaching. They don't move up with the kids. So, for example, like a mite level, it might take you 5-10 years to master that level. Where, when I started coaching, right, I'd always tell parents, you just because I played the game 20 years doesn't mean that makes me a good coach, right? It's, as a coach, you gotta keep learning and evolving, and you learn, little things and what works, what doesn't. But over there, right, it's those some of those coaches are 20 years at the mite level, 20. And then it goes level by level. And just the practices, I mean, they practice so hard. One thing that I liked there was, because you are practicing so much, and what would tend to be back, I don't think it's like that now, but back in our era, right, when you practiced, you didn't have so much time to practice on your individual skills and get that up, keep that sharp, or improving that, right? It was, you did that on your own time, right? Because our practices were, because of all the travel and everything here in the pro game, you may be working on, team structured stuff for systems or whatever, power play, or, your forecheck, or, and back then, it was, the skills part of it maybe was forgotten about. But over in Finland, like that was part of, there was at least a practice, especially when we're doing 2 a day, one would be specified on the skills part of it. So I actually, to be honest, I think my game improved more in one season there than it did 4 years over here, between the American League and the NHL. Although, I was injured at the time, but I just noticed, and was that improvement because of that passion I found again, and that, giving it back? I'm not sure, but I know, like, my game really it came to the next level after just one season there. But yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I went over there, my first practice, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm like, can I even play in this league? Like, they practice so hard. It was like a game. And I'm like, man, these guys are going 100 miles an hour, and they play, you're doing physical drills, they're playing tough, right? They're all out. And then the game would come and be like, man, we're these guys that were in practice, right? We're in Canada, we're the opposite. It's like, yeah, we'll practice, but once that game cart comes, right, it's freaking everything all out. I mean, that kind of surprised me and shocked me, the way practices were. Like, they were intense, and guys went hard. Like, they pushed themselves. So, yeah, and it's like, as you say, a country of 5 million people. You see where their national team's at, right? It's just amazing. And part of that is the work ethic and the coaching. It's, because they run their programs under the pro teams. So it goes all the way down to when you first start playing. If you're part of the Okrit team, you go through those stages, through the mites, the squirts, the peewees, right? And your goal is to make the pro team. But all those coaches work together and collaborate together, as a whole organization. And they're there, for years. It's not like we're over here. It's basically more the dads follow the kids, right? With the coaching. So I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah. That totally would make a big difference for sure. That is the model here, right? I mean, that's what I've even done. Started at Adam and moved on to U13, and I'm not coaching my oldest now at U15, but you usually just graduate with your kids, and you don't stay in that one age group. Which, like I said, is different. Coaching U9 is different than coaching U11. It's different than coaching U13, right? And you start to figure out the developmental things that click and the things that don't. I could see how that could be a big advantage for sure. So is those paid positions then over there? They must be, obviously, if they're through the pro team, then they have non-parent coaches that just stay in that environment.
Yeah, they are. So that one of my old teammates, he's in charge of the program. So the Hungarian government gave them a bunch of money to the hockey program. So he started basically the academy there. Or there was some type of academy before, but it starts at I can't remember, maybe U12 and goes up from there. So they got all these teams. So they got 2 ice sheets and they got all the locker rooms for them there. But he's got 30 coaches he's hired, 30 coaches for all those teams, and he's got ones designated for everyone. Like all the equipment's provided for these players and kids. They're on the ice like every day. And so I was there this summer and I asked him, he's showing me around and everything, what they're doing. And I was kind of asking my opinion on things. And I was like, so I asked him, I said, what's it cost each kid to do this? Basically it's almost like what a prep school would be here. He's like, oh, it's free. I'm like, what? I said, over in the US or Canada, you're paying like 30, 50 grand for something like this. And it's free. I'm like, that's unbelievable. Right. And that's so, we're over here, as you see, just the costs, it's crazy. And then you might be eliminated in one player or two that could help make a difference to push the next ones because of the financial situation.
Yeah, so that's through government money you're saying there in these European countries. It's funded through the government federally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean that would be an answer. I mean, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges for sure now, and it actually breaks my heart too. Like you already said it, right? Like you wouldn't have probably played pro if that was the way it was, and now like how many people are we leaving behind because the costs are so expensive, and they get expensive early, right? As soon as you start playing travel or competitive, it gets really expensive, and takes a lot of players out of the ecosystem.
Like here in our area, so our boys, in Kentucky, Ohio area, like football and baseball's big, basketball. But my boys started doing football these last 2 years, and they love it. I love it because they can walk to practices for one, and I don't have to run them. But although that's fun for me, I love still coaching and stuff. But it's nice to sit back as dad and watch as well. But the fees for them to play football is $200 for the season, and they get all the equipment. I'm like, man, you can't even get a stick nowadays for $200.
Right.
And that's just one piece of the equipment, the way kids grow with their feet. And I got one kid on my team, he's went through 3 pairs of skates. He's into a size 11 now, and he's a 2009. And you just think, right, like it's and a kid that size and that weight, you're not buying him the cheap pair, because he'll just break those down in a month's time, right? So you're you're looking at the mottos now that are upwards of $1,000.
Yeah.
And that stuff starts to add up, and the travel part of it, right? It's usually what the fees are. You can probably double that, and that's what your travel costs are going to be with hotels and all that, and meals on the road. So it is it's a big, that's why I tell all the kids I coach, like I always tell them, like, you better be appreciative of this, because it is a big commitment for families financially and time.
Yeah, for sure. And isn't that a difference too between the European model and the North American model? Like, there's so many people here in North America that are really game driven. Like, 75 games a season for these kids that are 11 years old, whereas the European model is more practice time, less competition time. Isn't that true?
Yeah, yeah, and I see it now when I'm coaching. Like, um, you know, one part is you want to keep teaching the accountability, right? Well, that accountability is showing up on time and being at all the practices, right? And having all your equipment and being organized and all that. But I'll see that at times. Like, oh, Johnny's not coming this weekend because it could be a practice weekend. But if it's the game weekend, they're all there, and it's rightfully so. Parents who wants to watch a practice, you'd rather watch a game once they're, and I even say it even at the old timers levels, right? As soon as you put a scoreboard up there with a time and a score, the whole game changes, right?
Yeah.
It's just that psychological part. But it's, I tell my parents, so we use that iceberg analytics, and I use that as a teaching tool, for the team and for the players individually. But it's amazing, these analytics nowadays. And some parents say, well, oh, these analytics are crazy. I'm like, well, it's the same as analytics has always been kept. It's stats, it's games played, it could be goals, assists, penalty minutes, could be for goalies, shots or whatever, right? It's just now on, it's taking it to the next level with the analytics and the stats. But ones that I look at with the kids when I run them is the shift time, possession time, and all that. But I'll tell kids, okay, Connor McDavid's probably he's your best player in the world. He plays 25 minutes a game, and he's got a minute and a half puck possession time, so he plays 95% of the game without the puck. So you know I said, well, now look at our team here. Our top player, he's a minute and a half puck possession time. He had 17 minutes ice time. He's playing majority of the game without the puck. So I'm like, where do you guys think you're going to get better? Right? Now you go to a practice of 60 minutes, you probably get 60 minutes of puck possession and time.
Right.
So when you break it that way to the parents and stuff, and it's just that's the reality of it. And that's the one part, trying to teach them, okay, there's more to the game when you have the puck, right? It's if you're going to play the game 90% of the game without it, right? We got to focus on what you're doing when you don't have the puck. And maybe this is why your puck possession time is down in the game, and you go over videos and stuff. But it's nowadays with these analytics, it's crazy. I mean, you can run everything, and it shows everything, and it's it's a real stat, really. It's the same as if you're counting your goals and assists. There's just 1,000 ways to break it down, and how we
Yeah.
utilize that information to make you better individually, and how do we make the team better, right? It's one I would look at is giveaways, right? So it counts giveaways, and my team was really high, and I'm like, look, we got to have a team goal to get down to this percentage, right? And now let's look at why that it's this giveaway percentage is so high individually and as a team. Right? So there's watching the video, there's no puck support, or maybe you're panicking with the puck, and it's just teaching tools, right? Trying to help them.
Yeah.
And that's what I find with video. It's kids nowadays, they want to see it. It's, you draw it on the board, and where they probably can't read my chicken scratch anyway. It's just better. I just put everything on the video and let it go, because they want to see it visually.
Yeah.
And
No, that's a great
there's
point.
those
I mean,
tools out there.
I mean, I was just going to, sorry to cut you off there, but
Yeah,
it was a great point with the whole, I mean, identifying how much of the
yeah,
game is not with the puck on your stick. And I was just reflecting while you were saying that, my U15 son was in a tournament this past weekend, and I ended up doing the video for the parents, right, of the Facebook feed or whatever, right, live, and I was doing like essentially commentary, and I was
Yeah.
coaching kind of through the commentary, like talking about certain scenarios and stuff. And anyways, it was crazy how many people came up to me and like thanked me for doing that. And I've learned so much, parents mostly, right, or grandparents, and um, but then the boys were all obviously watching it too, and there was something to be said for that, because we spend so much time on physical skills too, right? Like everyone is so good, because so much emphasis is put on that now. But I find that as a coach, it is hard to find the time to teach all those areas away from the puck, right? Like that there is, like we talked about that earlier at the start, like the conceptual side of hockey, and like what you're trying to accomplish when you don't have the puck and you're on offense. Like what are you trying to do in that scenario? Or you don't have the puck and you're on defense, what are you trying to do in that scenario? And I think that those are usually the parts that are overlooked, yet that's essentially the majority part of the game is that, right? Like how are you affecting the game when you don't have the puck in your stick? Because that's most of the players out there. So um yeah, I love that
Yeah.
you do that, and using video is a great tool for that. And actually, it sparked some interest for me, is actually to create some learning videos just in general, for players out there, because I think it is something that they don't get enough of. And I know at the junior level with the coaches that I'm working at, and even the midget level, I mean, it's like they're always amazed at how little the players understand the game. At that point, that they haven't
Yeah.
learned X, Y,
Yeah.
or Z to this point. So, anyways,
And
I mean,
that's where I find a weekday practice, right? It's parents running from work, grabbing something to eat, getting the kids on time for practice, and them jumping on the ice, and then they're running right, after practice, because you got to get home, get your homework finished and ready, for bed and school the next day. And that's where I find, like, I do these weekends where we call them high performance weekends, and we'll do two on ice practices on a Saturday, and I'll mix in video and off ice between those two, and then we'll do two on a Sunday. And I just find those work better for to try and do some of the teaching with the off ice stuff and the video, right? Because during the week it's hard to, you don't have the time. You're not going to
yeah,
spend 35 minutes before or after practice. Maybe some teams do, but it's for my team, I think it'd be too tough. So that those weekends work well.
right.
You know, yeah, of course, obviously it's not a game weekend, but that's where some people maybe don't understand. They're going to get more out of this practice weekend than they are, us playing 4 games, right? So it's just finding that balance between that. I think, playing too many games, it's okay. You might be having, and you can see it the younger years, you might be having success, but how is that success happening? Are you cheating the game, or is it, how are those situations coming? And you keep playing all these games, you might be just those bad habits just keep getting stronger and stronger, where you don't even have time to correct it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it is balancing, I guess, that passion, like you say. I mean, kids are passionate about competition, as you pointed out. You mean put a scoreboard up there, and the players love it, and sometimes it's a little bit harder to get that love out of practice, but
Oh,
it's
that's
always the ones that move on.
yeah, in practices, that's I'll do like a red versus black team stuff. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and that's, well, when we played, right? It
yeah,
was when that stuff happened, man. That was usually when fights would break out, and but that's where obviously not at the youth level, but you're trying to create that competitive part in the practice, and keep it obviously within the boundaries, because I tell my kids, like, look, you guys are still on the same team, like, you know yeah, I
yeah,
want you guys playing hard, but I don't want you guys trying to take each other's heads off either, right? You're still on the same team here. But yeah,
yeah,
just trying to create that in practice, and that's you know that's when you see them get engaged, and you're getting the most out of them. So anytime that I can do that to make it a competition, I really see them, now they're sweating, working, which is what you want.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Any, I think we should touch maybe just on your time with the Hungarian program. You're of Hungarian descent, and you got to spend some time with the national team program there. What was your experience like there on the international level, and being a part of what Hungary had going on?
Yeah, so when I played when I first went to Austria, I went to the Red Bull team out of Salzburg, and that's where I played majority of my end of my career was in the Austrian league, and I just I tell people, they ask me, well, where all did you play? I said, well, whoever would hire me, basically. I was all over the place, but by my last 4 years was the team out of Hungary, which was in the Austrian league. And Kevin Primo, I don't know if you remember Kevin, he was the coach there. He used to coach with the Oilers. So when I first went there, and there were some other players there, Harlan Pratt, who he grew up in Redwater. You'd probably remember him from Sherwood Park. So there were some players that I knew there, and so when I first went there, I really loved it. I loved the country, the people in the city. The Hungarians actually remind me a lot of the Finnish, just just real hardworking people, and down to earth, and kind of about the team. And so I really enjoyed it. We had some good seasons there. And after my second season, they'd approached me, and at that point I was 39. I was I was unsure. I was thinking, well, enough's enough here. Because the kids were getting at the age too. They were going to Hungarian school. They actually both spoke fluent Hungarian.
Right.
My wife and I always say, well, if they were smart, they would have kept it up, and they would have had a secret language against us. We wouldn't have had a clue what they're talking about. But of course, after a year gone from there, they lost it. But no, the family and I really, really loved it there, loved the people. They were great to us. And so that the team had approached me, say, hey, would you be willing to play on our national team if we were to get you citizenship? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Because I after the 2 years there, I'd built relationships with all these Hungarian players, and majority of our national team players were playing on our team that played in the Austrian league. So in my mind, it was like, yeah, if anything I can do to help the team and help my existing teammates, absolutely. So they granted me, and there was another Canadian guy, Andrew Sorower, who's from Saskatoon area. They granted us citizenship, and that at first we'd actually just got it like 2 weeks before the World Championship tournament, so we were unsure of okay, are we going to get it, or are we going to play? Because we stayed after the season to train and practice with them, and we ended up getting it, and we went to, it was a Pool B in Krakow, Finland, or Poland, sorry, and we qualified to move up to Pool A. I was like, wow, it was unbelievable. Like, it was a pretty exciting time for Hungary, and it was great, because after that, like I was telling you earlier, my friend, who's running the academy there, right? It was okay. Hockey drew some attention. Soccer was always the number one sport. Right now, they started putting more money into the hockey program, and rinks started going up. So it was cool to see that happen, like to be a part of that. It's that team was helping change the culture and everything of hockey in the country of Hungary. And then the next year we went Pool A, and that was playing against Canada and US. My last game, I retired after that tournament. I was at that time 41, but my last game was against Team USA, playing against players like Austin Matthews and all these great players, and Connor McDavid, right, playing against Team Canada and Brad Marchand, and just seeing it was amazing to see kind of how where the game has came from where we started. How much, if I look back through those 20 years, how it evolved, it's unbelievable. really.
What was that experience like? Like that's so like to win. I didn't realize Hungary was even a Pool B, so that was surprising me to hear that. And then you to qualify for Pool A. Wow, what an accomplishment! What was that like? A 41-year-old Frankie Banham trying to keep up with Austin Matthews. How were you doing?
Yeah. Well, that my last year is I was really probably when I hit 35, 36, the knees started to really go, and my one knee was pretty bad. I guess millions of shots, right? Just shooting and shooting and falling on the ice. It was just starting to catch up. So my last year, well, I had surgery that summer, and then I was just fighting my knee. I was getting it drained. I was getting drained every game, and they were shooting it up like it was. And even I was like, man, in my mind at the camp before we went to the Pool A, which was in St. Petersburg that year, I was like, man, I don't know if I can make it. Like my knee was shot, and I'm like, you know what, I gotta do whatever I can. So I talked with the coaches, and we'd agreed upon, like, they're like, well, we want you there no matter what, whether it's if you play or not, but just for the support. The younger guys all look up to you, respect you, and just you being around the team is enough. So we'd agreed that before then that I wasn't going to play all the games. I'd play some. So I can't remember. I think I ended up playing three games, 4 games. I'm not sure. I played against Slovakia, Canada, and U.S. But yeah, it was. I remember one shift I got caught out there with Connor McDavid, and he went around me like it was like me going around my kids, and I was going as fast as I could, and I was like, I felt like he wasn't trying, and I'm like, are you kidding? And on the play, Brad Marchand scores on the play, and we line up for the face-off, and I look over to Marshy, and I was like, there's no way I was ever going to catch that guy. He's unbelievable. And Marshy, who was a top player in the world himself, says to me, he goes, it's unbelievable how good he is at his age. And now I don't feel so bad, because now when I see highlights on TV, he does it to those guys too. So, but yeah, it's just amazing the work. I was sitting on the bench with my one buddy that I was telling you, Chaba Kovac is his name, who is running the academy now in Hungary. And he was the next oldest guy on I think in the tournament. He was 34. I was 41. It was, we were the old guys, but I'm sitting on the bench with him, and I look over him in the Canadian game, and the guys are just freaking. I said, they need a speed limit out here. I'm like, God, like, this is unbelievable how fast the guys are. I'm like,
Oh man, that's awesome.
but no,
Oh,
it
what an
was
experience though.
it
That's
was a
super
good
cool.
experience to see that. Yeah,
Yeah, what
yeah,
fantastic, man. We well, maybe we'll wrap it up. I mean, I really appreciate it. We had
that
a
was
little bit
fun.
of technical difficulty there, and thanks for picking up your phone halfway through and getting her done. But great
Yeah,
to catch up. I mean, so many years and so many stories, and great to see that you're still giving back and being a part of the game there in Cincinnati and helping it grow. And that's one of the things that I think we're both probably pretty passionate about is trying to keep the game alive and keep it strong and keep growing it. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for spending some time here today with us.
yeah. No, I appreciate it, and yeah, I'd love to get up that way. I'm not sure if you still do the father-son trip, but I know we spoke about that until COVID hit. But
Right.
definitely like to get back for that. That's that sounds like a great bonding experience, which is one thing you kind of take for granted, right? Is that time with your kids, with the everyday busy life. But yeah, hopefully if you're still doing that there, I'll get up there at some point to attend that. That'd be fun.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, well, we'll make it happen. But yeah, thanks. Have a happy holiday here. We're recording this right before Christmas, so I don't know when it'll be released, probably a little after, but happy holidays to everybody out there listening. And thanks for tuning in. Frank, thanks for being here today. Sure. Okay, thank you for joining us today, Frank and I. for our conversation. That was a long time coming. So, Frank, if you are still listening, or even if you're not, I always like to thank my guests. So thank you so much for taking the time with me and allowing my listeners the opportunity to know a little bit about you and a little bit about what it takes to play pro for 20 years and what it takes to score 83 goals in the WHL and the trials and tribulations of trying to grind it out in the pro hockey lifestyle. So thank you so much for your wisdom and for your shares. I really love your perspective and all the ideas about coaching that you shared, and it sounds like the players of Cincinnati are really benefiting from having you behind their bench. So thanks again for everyone out there. Once again, happy holidays, all the best in 2023, and until next time, play hard.